Welcome to Dave Examines Movies and TV. Today I will be examining what it truly means to live in a dog-eat-dog world with 2006 The Devil Wears Prada, where you will either learn to be true to yourself or become the demon inside. Which one will you choose? That's all. Hey, I'm Dave, and I created DaveExaminesMovies.com. I've been reviewing movies for over 10 years, and I believe I've discovered the ultimate method for reviewing film. I've always used a 1 out of 100 star rating, but somehow that was still too biased and inaccurate for my tastes. I wanted something so unquestionable that even if you hated something that I loved, you could appreciate my logic as well, and I found it. I call it Interpreting the Stars, which splits a movie into 10 categories, 5 solid categories that fit any film, and 5 specialty categories created specifically for the movie at hand. The first 5 categories are people, writing, behind the scenes, narrative arc, and overall entertainment. Each of these categories will have 5 subcategories of their own that ultimately define the star rating of the film. You'll no longer have to ask why a movie's rated 76% versus 77%. You will now know what each and every star represents. This is Dave Examines Movies and TV. Alright everybody, how's everybody doing this evening? Good? Good, me too. I have a couple of announcements actually. So yesterday I came out with the review of Speed, and I was telling everybody that I submitted the podcast for iTunes, for Google Play Podcasts, and as well as Stitcher, because those don't automatically just play your podcast willy-nilly. You have to basically be featured on their service. So I submitted my review application for all of those 3 different services, and I just got back notifications from all 3 of them last night that they're accepted and everything. So if you use Google Play Podcasts, if you use Stitcher Podcasts, if you use iTunes specifically, they all now feature Dave Examines Movies and TV. So whatever you use, it's perfectly alright. Go check it out on your podcast provider and give me a like and a subscribe and all that fun stuff. So today I'm reviewing The Devil Wears Prada, as you already know. This is actually my first time watching The Devil Wears Prada, but it didn't feel like that when I turned it on because, well, I also watched the TV show Supergirl, and the first season of Supergirl, back when it was on CBS, it was like identical to The Devil Wears Prada. Identical. And even though I hadn't seen the movie at that point, I kind of knew when watching Supergirl that this was taking at least some inspiration off of The Devil Wears Prada. And I mean, I'll get into that a little bit later, but it's like everything that this movie is about, that's what they were just completely copying off of in Supergirl. So I don't feel like I was completely surprised about what I was seeing, but it is what it is. In 2006, The Devil Wears Prada came out. Not sure if I would be a fan of it or not. It's kind of a female-heavy type of a movie. So what did I think about it? So to get into that, we'll get into the first category, which of course is people. The subcategories there are acting, characters, casting, importance, and chemistry. Alright, so first off, we have acting. And we have Meryl Streep, which is, the goddess of the Oscars, apparently. She's in there, and Anne Hathaway is as well. Now, Anne Hathaway isn't always seen in the Oscars, but she did a pretty good job in Les Mis and other things like that. So you do have some talented people on screen here. However, none of them really pull off the greatest, balance between acting and emotion and all that. It's all pretty leveled out and just typical and not much to say there. It's not really noticeable or memorable as far as the acting goes. Nothing's terrible, but nothing's great. So I'll give that 1 out of 2 stars for the acting subcategory. Next up is the characters. Are the characters worthwhile and memorable and blah, blah, blah? I think it's more like the actors are memorable. When I think back to this movie, even though I've never seen it before, when I thought back to it, I kind of understood the characters, but I remembered, you know, not the character. I remembered Anne Hathaway and Meryl Streep. This is the movie with Anne Hathaway and Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep's a big boss lady that's strict and everything, that's fine. But I'm remembering it more for the actors than for their characters, because their characters all kind of blend together as just these high stressful people that just live a very fashionable, material life. So they're not really all that memorable as characters, I gotta say. So for that, I'm gonna have to give it, once again, 1 out of 2 stars for that, because it could have been better, I think, for the characters. Next up is casting. Can anybody else have played these parts well? Or are these the quintessential actors for playing these characters? I don't think so. They might be memorable actors and people that you like to see in a lot of different things, but can I say that anybody else could have filled those shoes? I'm pretty sure that would have been an easy thing to do for pretty much anybody who's, say, pretty or whatever, because it's a feminine type of movie, but other than that, it's not much more. Next up is, casting. I gave 1 out of 2 stars. Importance. Do all the players play a part? Do they all add to the plot of the film? Yes. The boss has more reason to be there than you think. And Anne Hathaway's character is probably the most prominent as far as importance. Needless to say, they're not insanely important, but they all do have kind of a different role, and without one, then the film might feel a little bit lopsided. So I'm going to have to say 2 stars out of 2 stars for importance. Next up is chemistry. How does everybody work well together? Not just the main characters, everybody else in there as well. How does everybody just work with each other? For that, I'll have to say pretty well. Pretty well. I think the chemistry works out. I think that Anne Hathaway works well with Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep works well with every single person in there. I think Stanley Tucci is specifically a pretty decent character that interacts with everybody as well. I think as far as chemistry goes, it has nothing to worry about. And again, I'll give it 2 out of 2 stars for that. That's the last subcategory, which means that the people score is 7 out of 10. So that's not a terrible score, pretty average. Better than nothing, right? So 7 out of 10 for people. And the next up is writing. So in writing, I have to review the dialogue, how balanced it is, about the story, its originality, and how interesting it is. So, first off, we have the dialogue. How was the dialogue? I would say it's not bad at all. I think there's a lot of good, quick-witted lines that they use here and there. Stanley Tucci specifically is pretty much just kind of floating there as a guide for Anne Hathaway's character. Anne Hathaway has all these internal dialogue things going on for her character as she's transforming her character. Meryl Streep is tough and is just cranky as always, but there's a softer side of her as well that has to go into the dialogue. So as far as that is considered, I'd say the dialogue's pretty well done. I'd have to say 2 out of 2 stars for that. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Balance is next. Is it over convoluted? Is it an easy story to understand? Can we all comprehend it? I would say for balance, it's pretty simple. It's a straightforward film about a transformation of a girl. Whether that's good or bad, it doesn't matter. It is understandable, and you can tell what's going on. As for the story, the story isn't much of anything, really, to be completely honest. It's about a girl going after her dreams, and she's found one way to do that. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the best way to achieve her dreams, but it was one way, I guess you could call it. I don't know. The story is the story. It doesn't have a lot of substance to it because I think they're trying to go for something else. Because I don't agree with the story. I don't really agree with the direction that they take to tell the story. So I'm going to have to give it 1 out of 2 stars for that. It could have been better as far as that's concerned. Originality. Is it original or have we seen this before? Now, like I said before, I have seen this before. I've seen it in Supergirl, but Supergirl came after. So I knew while watching Supergirl that it was clearly copycatting off of this movie. So as far as that's concerned, I will say that it's original, even though I've seen it before. People have actually used this concept and copy-pasted it onto other stuff, so I have to remain knowledgeable enough to say that it was original here and not there. Like I said, I've never seen it before, but I knew the basics of it. Originality, I would say 2. Nothing wrong there, 2 out of 2. Is it interesting, though? Well, is it interesting? Well, depends on who you ask. I'm a guy. There's very little testosterone in this film. Lots of women, lots of fashion, lots of materialistic ideals and views of life. So do I consider that interesting? Not in the least bit. The most thing that's interesting for me is who's playing in the movie. So Anne Hathaway, Meryl Streep, Stanley Tucci, things like that. I would consider that interesting. But as far as the story, as far as the plot direction and all that, I wouldn't really say so. So for that, I'm going to give it right in the middle and say 1 out of 2 stars. I'd say it's not really a couple-friendly film either, because same reason why some kid movies aren't family-friendly, if the adults can't enjoy it. So it's not a couple-friendly movie, it's more of a female-friendly movie that females could love and cherish over and things like that. So I'd consider that 1 out of 2 stars for that. That gives the writing score in general an 8 out of 10, so a little bit higher than the people score. So altogether, we're up to about 15 out of 20 points. So moving on up in the world, that brings us to the behind-the-scenes category. Now, the behind-the-scenes category covers a range of things like visuals, directing, editing, the advertisement, and the music. Okay, so for these, this one doesn't have a huge score all in general, and I'll try to explain that. The visuals. I gave the visuals 1 out of 2 stars. And the reason why I gave that a mid-range number is because the visuals here didn't relate to me. There's nothing going on that looks spectacular or out of this world, like, special. The visuals were really designer and fashion friendly stuff, which I'm sure a lot of women will be watching and think, ooh, pretty, but that's not what a movie's about. As far as a movie's considered, the visuals were just average. There was nothing special about them. So as far as that's considered, I will say 1 out of 2 stars, okay? If we were watching a model come down the runway and show off her, designer clothes, that's one thing. If we're watching a movie, it's another thing entirely. 1 for visuals. Next is directing. Like I said, I didn't really care for some of the direction that they went. And the reason why I said this, and I know it's based off of a book, and I didn't read the book, so I can't really say anything about the book, but the direction of the story is a little awful for the characters. And I should have mentioned this for the characters as well, because it's important. Anne Hathaway's character starts off as a unique character that sticks out from the rest of the crowd. She's like one of those matches that stick out, and you could tell in a group of 1,000 people who she is immediately, because she's not like the rest. She voices her own thing. She's a strong, independent woman, and throughout the movie, she kind of degrades herself and turns into one of these women, and then she just kind of blends in with the rest. And when that happens, I wasn't a huge fan of it because I liked how she started off. And I knew while watching, in the middle of watching, I knew she'd either stay like this or return to how she was before, or maybe even change the game for maybe the rest of the people who were blending in. I didn't know how it was going to end, but I did know that a majority of it, she was in the rest of the crowd as just a stuck-up brat. And I didn't like that. It's kind of like in Mean Girls when she turned into a mean girl herself, but in Mean Girls it was a little bit different. It's been a while since I saw that, so I can't really get into depth there. But with The Devil Wears Prada, it's like she accepted the devil within her, and then she just turned into one of these terrible creatures. I kind of understand as far as the story progression goes, but I didn't like that aspect. For the directing, I said 1 out of 2 stars. I thought they could at least direct it better, because if that's the route they're going to take, then at least direct our eyes to something else. Direct our eyes to a possibility that there's some kind of good in her left, that she's got a plan, but I didn't really sense that at all. So for that, I'm going to have to say 1 out of 2 stars for directing. Next up is editing. Now, I did like the editing. I thought there was a lot of nice shots that were edited together here. I didn't see anything wrong with them. I didn't see anything that was just average. I think, for the most part, the editor did their job here. And it deserves a 2 out of 2 for that. Advertisement, I wouldn't say this is as advertised. I really wouldn't. I think there was some false advertising in this one, because all the imagery for this film, and I remember the trailers for the movie, and my wife agreed with me when we were talking about it, that the advertisements for this made it look like a comedy. And it's really not. It's not really a comedy. There's some comedic elements here and there in the beginning, but it's more drama and like character-oriented stuff than it is comedy. So while they did have some comedy here and there, it wasn't like I thought it was going to be. I'm going to have to give this a 1 out of 2 stars, because it had some, but not much. Finally, the music is the final subcategory for the behind-the-scenes category, so I'm going to say the music was average. It was nothing to really stand out. So for this, I'm going to have 1 out of 2 stars. Again, it's nothing to really dive into. There's nothing special about it. 1 out of 2 stars for music. That actually brings the BTS behind the scenes category up to 6 out of 10 points. It's not the greatest score in the world, which brings our score up to 21, I think, out of 30, which doesn't sound the best. That's 2/3. Next up in our category list is narrative arc score. As I mentioned in all the podcasts, narrative arc is important. If you're watching a movie and you feel like something's missing, this might be it. So in the narrative arc, if you were listening in elementary school, you have the introduction, the inciting incident and crossing of the threshold. You have obstacles, the epiphany and the climax, and you have the falling action. All of these are very important to tell a story that is solid. Now, the narrative arc here isn't terrible, actually. They have almost everything in the bag. But I want to just go through those. For the introduction, you're obviously introduced to what kind of world we're going to be watching, which is the fashion world. You have Anne Hathaway, who's a little bit different than everybody else, and then you have the big boss Meryl Streep, who just transforms everybody because if they don't listen to her, they're going to get fired or whatever. So you have those people. So introduction is 2 out of 2 stars. Nothing wrong there. Perfect introduction. The inciting incident and crossing of the threshold. Well, the inciting incident would be when Anne Hathaway comes to this huge industry, and then she applies for it and has this interview. The crossing of the threshold actually comes down to when Meryl Streep takes a chance on Anne Hathaway and hires her, even though she's a really oddball character. So that's what happens there. That's 2 out of 2 stars as well. The obstacles, pretty simple. You have a girl who is completely out of her norm when she joins this job. And so many things happen here, and so many things are in her way that she has to understand how to get past the obstacles is to more or less become a stuck-up brat, like the main boss there, Meryl Streep. So those were the obstacles. The obstacles were just all over the place, and the only way to get over them was to become more like Meryl Streep. The climax was weak. It was there. There was an epiphany, which led up to the climax, but it was weak. I saw it. It was clearly there, but it was anticlimactic. I guess that's the only way to put it. It was there, and then it wasn't, and so I'm just going to say 1 out of 2 stars for the climax. That's the main issue that this narrative arc actually had, because the falling action was perfectly okay. It had a return to the norm moment, which is what you want to see with the narrative arc. So, and all in all, that's 2 out of 2 stars, so everything there is 9 out of 10 stars for the narrative arc score. 9 out of 9. So instead of 21 out of 30, you now have 30 out of 40. All right, you're at 75% altogether, which brings us to the entertainment score. This is the most important part of my reviewing method, because if I'm not entertained, that might bring the score way down. This is what I'm talking about. When you see the Oscars and there's a boring movie that's winning, this is why, because they don't care about this category, the entertainment category. So, let's talk about the entertainment category. We have subcategories of, is it rewatchable? Is it fun? Do you have an impulse to buy it? Do you have an impulse to talk about it? And does it suck the audience in while watching? All good questions, so let's get into it. If you are a girl and you want to rewatch this, fine. I think it would be rewatchable just for the fashion parts, because pretty and sparkly and whatever, I might be stereotyping, and I'm sorry for that, but I have seen a lot of women enjoy this movie. I don't consider it rewatchable. I consider it, I watched it the one time, that's good enough for me, I don't want to see it again. For me, that's how it was, and for me, that's how I have to put it down. 0 out of 2 stars for rewatchability. If it's on TV, I would probably continue flipping through, because there's probably something better on, in my opinion. Is it fun? I gave this 1 out of 2 stars because there's certain elements that were, of course, fun. I did like the actors that were playing these characters. I did like what they were saying. I did like a few of the comedic elements here and there. But that's really all I have to say about it. The entire, aspect of me watching this movie wasn't all that fun. It was what it was for me. So 1 out of 2 stars for the funness. Did I have an impulse to buy it? Well, I already said I didn't have an impulse to watch it in the slightest. Do you think I want to buy it? For me, I have to say this is 0 out of 2. And I'm not entirely sure who out there would be like, that movie is so great I have to buy it. Because I just didn't get that vibe. Even no matter who you are, I didn't get that vibe. The impulse to talk about it, this is when, either I hate it or I love it or whatever. I need to talk to somebody about it, and I'm going crazy because I can't. That's the idea behind here. 0 out of 2 stars. I don't really care to talk about this. In fact, I don't really care to review this, but it's my job. But the impulse to talk about it, no, 0 out of 2 stars as well. The last subcategory for the entertainment category here is, does it suck the audience in? I would say that it can. There's a possibility there for certain moments in the scenes, some emotional, dramatic moments. It can suck the audience in pretty well. Some of the comedic moments, it can suck the audience in because you're waiting to see something specific happen. Though that specific thing that you're expecting to happen doesn't always happen. So for that, I'm going to have to say only 1 out of 2 stars. I don't think it really sucks the audience in. I think it sometimes almost does, but that's about it. So 1 out of 2 stars for that, which brings the whole entertainment score only up to 2 out of 10 stars. I mean, that's mine personally, and this is the most opinionated and biased section of my reviewing method. So take that as you will. But my entertainment score is 2 out of 10 scores. That brings it up to 32 out of 50 for the main section. This is when we go into our specialty categories. Now, these were written before I saw the movie, and they are specifically dealt with, and they have to do with my expectations of the film, based off of the advertisements, based off of what people have said, based off of whatever, and that's what we're going to go into here. Okay, so the first thing that came to my mind while watching the advertisements, when reading about it, when all of this, I figured that this is predominantly women-centric, right? This is a woman's movie. Lots of females in this film, no doubt. Even when it came to Stanley Tucci, who is there as, you know, he's a gay character, he's very feminine, so even he's there. When it comes down to the women and their boyfriends, but mostly speaking, Anne Hathaway's character's boyfriend, he is so boring and so forgettable that he's barely even there. I would definitely say that as far as the predominantly women-centric category goes, I was completely right there. 10 out of 10 stars for that. The next thing you notice when you're watching these advertisements and seeing the trailers and whatnot is you see a lot of fashion. Yeah, there's lots of fashion here. It's about a fashion magazine. It's about this woman who's really serious about her fashion and everybody else's fashion around her as well that she judges people on. So I would say that the fashion is definitely there. Fashion and, materialistic values and all that. 10 out of 10 stars for that category as well. Like I said before, when I watched the trailers, I immediately thought comedy. It just looked like it was going to be a funny movie. And it's not. There's some comedic things here and there, doop-de-doop-de-doo. And, I always kind of giggled when Meryl Streep would say, "That's all," because I had this app that had let you dub people over for different movies, and Meryl Streep's was, "That's all," and I had no idea what it was talking about until I saw this movie. So that was fun. But it's not a funny movie. It's rather dramatic, and to me, I think when Anne Hathaway kind of turns into Meryl Streep's character, it's kind of dark in that aspect of her losing her lightness and her uniqueness. So I wouldn't really call this a comedy. I would say 5 out of 10 stars for that at most, because it does have some moments, but for the most part, no. The next thing I would think when looking at it, this kind of looks like a rom-com. It kind of looks like some kind of romantic comedy here. And it's not. It has some romance here, so I feel stupid for giving it 5 out of 10 stars because the boyfriend is boring, and that's really all it really has to say about romance. I mean, the boyfriend's boring, and when they bring in the guy from The Mentalist, I think it was, his character didn't really serve a huge purpose. He was there as an ends to a means, but they had they threw in some romance there as well. I wasn't really feeling it there. So romance, I gotta say 5 out of 10 stars as well, because it just wasn't what it should have been, in my opinion. Last one is it halfway decent? For this, I'd probably just say yeah. I mean, it's not perfect. I don't think I could really fix anything when it came to that. If anything, I would just throw in some more guys so you could level it out a little bit more. But halfway decent, yeah. 10 out of 10 stars for that. That means that the total for the specialty categories was 40 out of 50 there. And that all adds up to our total ranking, our total percent, our total star of 72. 72 stars out of 100 possible stars is our score for The Devil Wears Prada. I'd be interested in hearing what you think of The Devil Wears Prada, because I know this is somewhat of a popular movie amongst certain audiences. But for me, I thought it was rather average and could have been better type of scenario. The Devil Wears Prada, 72%, 72 stars. So, like I said before, my podcast can be seen on pretty much absolutely every single podcast listener out there. So check it out. Subscribe to it on your podcast thingamajig. Write to me and tell me what do you think I should review next. And I will consider every single suggestion. You can find me on Twitter. I am at IAMDWG. That's IAMDWG on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook, Dave Examines Movies. You can find me on my website, daveexaminesmovies.com, which also has a request review option on there as well. If you go to my website, you'll see there's like thousands of written reviews there as well. So go into there. Lots of stuff to find. You can write to me at my email, which is dave@daveexaminesmovies.com. But other than that, I think that's all I have to say about that. Tomorrow we'll have a brand new review ready for you. I'm reviewing the children's movie that just came out last year called Trolls. I have a funny story about that as well, because it has to do with my kid and Trolls. Woo! So we'll be reviewing Trolls tomorrow, so join me for that at noon, as always. So I think that's all I have to say about that. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace out.